The affirmation is, I claim peace in prayer and share it generously. Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore wrote, it is the law of spirit that we must be that which we would draw to us. It is the law of spirit that we must be that which we would draw to us. If we would have peace and harmony in our environment, wrote Charles, we must establish it within ourselves. I want peace in my every interaction and circumstance, which means I must ground myself in the assurance that God is peace, and I am that peace in expression. In quiet confidence, I affirm these words after a restful interlude in the silence. Peace guides my thoughts and expresses through my words and actions. I am kind, I smile, I am loving, positive, and joyful. I am the peace I want to see in the world. And from Luke, in Luke we read, the dawn from on high will break upon us to give light to those who sit in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. Today's daily word is inner peace. Peg, you want to pick up with a prayer?
Sure. Let's gently close our eyes and go to our hearts. And we ask that Spirit open us up to knowing and believing, to giving and receiving, all that is that comes our way tonight, that we may be lights, luminous lights for one another. Amen.
Amen. Well, Dr. Lieberman starts one of the chapters with a quote from a Zen master. Each of you has a priceless treasure, says the Zen master. There is light emanating from your eyes, which illuminates mountains, rivers, and the great earth. Dr. Lieberman writes, our eyes not only absorb light, but they also reflect and emit it, causing our eyes to literally light up under certain conditions and appear dim under others. It's interesting, when I talked about, setting up the first week, I talked about, the importance of the essence, central nature of light, one of the four pillars of which Lieberman works on. And I shared, if you look at physics, what was the majority 1 century or one decade now becomes the minority, and then one under Newton, light is a particle, and waves as light as a wave is dismissed 100 years later. It's light is a wave, and the minority position is now this is a particle. And so who's in the majority, who's in the minority, seems to switch as, almost every century or so, and then along comes Einstein with another way of looking at a majority. But if you were looking at it today, I think Lieberman is holding literally, as among scientists, a minority position, that we not only take in photons, we also send out photons. And again, what is seen today as the minority position 75 years from now could well be, the majority position. But the majority, I think, would say that, if you went to physics departments and all that, would say, we take in photons, we don't, as it were, emit photons. But as I understand it, to get beyond that, to get beyond the literal, there's also considering that metaphysical light, which I think is so important. Remember, Lieberman talks about day one light, in the beginning, and again, not taking the Bible literally. Day one, let there be light, and there's light. But the sun is only created by day 4. So 2 different types of light. Day 1 light, sort of this inner spiritual light. Day 4, the actual photons. And it's going to be interesting next week when we start talking about lighting up your dreams. It's really looking at at nighttime, the poetry of night. looking at those, that day one, that inner light. But what I have, again, I found very, very useful, again, to think of it sometimes, to really honestly, truly think our metaphysical roots, to think of it metaphysically. When I was in Lynchburg, we had a wonderful group called Mystical and Metaphysical Group. We had a person, I had never really thought about crystals too much at all. We had a woman come in who was an expert on crystals, and I was just absolutely fascinated, to see the order of crystals. And, not to get, I'm taking the Integral Ministry course. Thank you very much for all you have contributed. I wouldn't be able to do it if it wasn't for this church, with Gary and Reverend Gary and Jane Simmons. And Jane she has us watch videos, and we watched this video of, it's freaky. Saliva before the person was praying and meditating, the same person's saliva after meditating. Whoa, you can, you don't have to be a trained scientist to see which was the before and which was the after. A boy and his dog, and their heart vibrations and the electromagnetic signals being sent out before, when the dog is in the room and the boy's in another room, and then when they come together, the pattern is just, it's like almost like synchronized dancing. And then when they leave the room and they go different way, it then is out of. That is. And then when you get to non-local interaction of particles, if there are two particles which have had an interaction, you can split them apart, send them in a way, far distance where they really can't communicate, and you switch the particles, spin this way, and this particle spin also starts switching that. Einstein called it spooky interaction, but I was so excited, about crystals, about thinking about it metaphysically, that I really, lying down, putting the thing on me, who knows whether literally that's what's happening. But I just found meditating and thinking of the order of the crystals and thinking that I could have that same type of order, I could have that same beautiful order in my saliva, and like the dog and the boy, in synchronicity. And so, in a sense, who cares whether my eyeballs are really sending out photons or not? The artwork which we saw, remember the artwork which we saw last week of the woman looking out? Oh my goodness, that was, or what we Paul Sanchez's of the Indian holy man looking. And I'm sorry I mispronounced. Could you give me the proper pronunciation? Wishasawakan. Looking from out of his eyes. As a matter of fact, one congregant came up to me and said, if you look in the business and the office side of it, we have a picture of Jesus sitting there with little people, from different. And her thing was, most of that were missionaries and with guns and we should take that out, and we should put Paul Sanchez's picture there showing with the item, which I think is a wonderful was a wonderful idea, but to think of, again, whether it's literal or not, I don't know about you, but there have been times in my life where I may have been low or down, but you could just sense that presence from somebody, and you a lot of times can see it in their eyes. And whether they were literally sending out photons or what, you could just sense the power and the support and the love. I also view progress as, my first Unity minister, Helise Green, used to say, we're in the upward forward. She would have us say that we're in the upward forward progressive movement of spirit. The mark of success is upon us. Well, I believe that, but I think progress oftentimes is like the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Long run, it's up, but progress all too often is 5 steps forward and 4 steps back. 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. And I think for many of us, what we're going through now is a four-step back. For a whole range of reasons. It appears to many of us to be a four-step back period. And that's why I think it's so important. People in our lives who, whether they're literally emitting photons or just spiritual photons to you. And so what I'd like to do, if we could go, and the importance of this day one light and day four light going around, if we could first talk about a time when we were low, as it were, and it was somebody in our life who was that positive influence shining out those rays, as it were, to us. And then if we could step back and talk about a time where we were that person shining that out to other people. If I could, I give my examples of this. I don't want to make it sound like, I had a horrible, but it was the relationship with my parents, for a whole range of reasons, was a difficult relationship with what they were going through, et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't get much encouragement or praise. And I think one of the reasons I turned into the, super achiever, and I call it the merit badge syndrome. I just put another merit badge on my chest, maybe now mommy and daddy will rise from the grave. And I've even had fantasies, with this room filled and Anne and Larry and Paula going and say, see, mommy, and daddy, and and my mother's reaction would probably go, oh, it's an awful shade of blue, Well, I kid you, we got a special tour in Washington, D.C. of the room where the Supreme Court decisions are made and all. And my mother looks around and said, they don't really dust this well, do they? So, so in that environment, the person whose eyes I think of and shining, again, brought up in a Jewish home, was a Jewish religious school, Mrs. Salita, my 4th and 5th grade religious school teacher. And she was the one who's, when I would write things or give it, would say, oh, that's really beautifully written, and I expect, Ricky, and if you knew me back then, it is Ricky. Ricky, I really expect great things from you. Wouldn't be surprised if you wind up governor of the state of New York or the U.S. senator from the state. And that kind of, that was real shining. I just remember that from, and a lot of the seeds which she's planted spiritually, I wish I could tell her it took 15 years before those seeds sprouted, but it was your sunlight, as it were, that, finally 15 years later played a large part in that sprouting. And an example of where I think I was that to somebody, and I'll not give her last name, but Dr. Joan, and she was, this was back in Tulsa, and Joan was a pretty high-level internist in the St. Francis healthcare system, which in Tulsa is the majority. It's Kaiser Plus it's the big kahuna in healthcare in Tulsa. And I didn't know this at the time, but she came up to me one week after a Sunday service and said, I never told you this, but I was sued for medical malpractice. And as I was going through this, I really started thinking I'm a failure as a doctor. I should hang up my shingle and, work at McDonald's or something or, just give up medicine and all that. And then a series of messages you gave on Sunday just really gave me the confidence to hang in there and to fight this. And I just wanted to let you know that this week the jury came back and I was found totally exonerated. And wanted to thank you for giving me that, that helping me to see that courage to continue. And I obviously didn't know it at the time. And since then, Dr. Joan has risen even higher in the St. Francis system. Peg, how about a time when somebody was that light shining at you, and a time when you were the light shining at somebody else?
Okay. Yes, I can address that. A time when someone else was shining a light on me was when I was at Unity of Roanoke Valley, and one of the ministers there was Catherine Robotham. She was just a lovely, loving person, and I I needed to have the courage to deal with a difficult relationship. And she sat down with me, and she was kind and encouraging, and she also helped me figure out how to do this in a way that would actually work, how it would be effective, and how long to wait, and when to bring it up. And so I did follow her advice, and things did go well on that. So I just, she's passed now, but I really bless her spirit for being the kind, loving minister that she was. And I've had to think about this when I was a light. And I recall a client I was working with at the time. She was a long-term client with me, and she had quite serious issues with her father regarding different forms of abuse. And I came in on Saturdays to work with her when nobody else was in our clinic, and let her rage, just let her rage against what had happened to her. I remember we had a chair, she kicked the chair across the room, and I was like, oh no, let's not damage the room. But no, she needed to do that. She needed to get out her rage before could talk to her dad about the abuse, and she did it. It took weeks, but she found the courage, and she did have the talk, and I think it changed her life. So I was so glad that she was able to evolve into that, and that I could be of help.
Thank you. Why don't we, if we could, and you're not, if you don't want to say anything, please feel free to pass, but just if we go, I guess, around a time when somebody was that light shining to you, and a time when you were the light shining on them, as it were. As they say, nobody likes to start first. Who'd like to speak second?
Hi, everybody. My name is Lisa, and I would say this is just one time that I can think of, and I was unaware of it. So I was in a near-fatal car accident in 2018, and a couple of my very good friends were called and came to the emergency, and they stayed all night and prayed over me and just stayed. I was unconscious, and I was told, afterwards, that they stayed all night and just held my hand and prayed, and the doctors said I shouldn't be alive. And so that felt like, to me, people truly believing and sharing their prayers and their light. And then something, I go to a 6:30 a.m. 12-step meeting on Wednesday mornings. And I had to work in the Sacramento office today, and I live in Davis, so I had to leave early so that I could get to work on time. And normally I get to work from home on Wednesday. And I had shared something, and I had to leave early. And this lady who I've never met before, she ran after me, and in the parking lot said, "Thank you so much for what you shared, and you woke me up because you're so alive, and you're so bright and cheery. But what you said really touched her, and I've never seen her before.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's small potatoes, but I mean, to me, that matters.
Wow.
There's no small potatoes.
Oh. There's all different.
There was a person who helped me so much when I needed to get out of my marriage, and I was finding it so difficult, so very difficult. I dragged my feet. I knew I needed to leave. I didn't know how. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how to speak up for myself. And this person was patient with me and listened to me and encouraged me and didn't tell me what to do. You know, it wasn't anything like that. She just sat with me and listened and encouraged, and my God, it got me through what was a really, really difficult time. And I'm very, very grateful for that. One time when I was a light to somebody, I found out after the fact, I had been a supervisor in the Postal Service. And I was on my way into the grocery store one time, and one of the people that I had supervised as a temporary employee, and they had no status. Those poor people had no status. They had to work the crummy hours and the crummy jobs. And this guy thanked me for being sensitive to his religious needs and not scheduling he or his wife on their holy days, even though if the union had found out, that would have been the end of that. So he was deeply appreciative, and it was months after the fact, so that made me feel really good.
That's great. Wow.
I'm Dawn.
Hi, Dawn.
And hi. So I had a similar experience. I actually moved here. I'm from California originally, but I lived in Oklahoma for 10 years.
Where in Oklahoma, out of here?
All over, but I left Oklahoma, Tulsa.
My first ministry was Tulsa.
Yeah. So I left Tulsa in the late 80s, 87. I was leaving a marriage, a bad marriage, and came here, back home, and I was trying to find a job and cleaning houses, because you can clean houses. They trained me, and I could interview jobs during that time frame. Anyway, I met a friend in a 12-step program, and I had no idea who she was. She asked me if I had a resume, and I just had happened to have one because my mom's partner had helped me with that. So I gave it to her, and I didn't realize she was a personnel manager of a good law firm in San Francisco. Anyway, helped get my foot in the door. It took a couple of months, 2 interviews. The first one I didn't get it, but anyway, so she's been a dear friend and a light in my life since then. So who knows? You just never know. And then where I'm a light, and it's because my grandson told me so. I have 2 grandsons, and and I have great relationships with both of them. But the younger one said that he can talk to me and trust me, and he knows that I'm not gonna squeal on him. So
Wonderful.
yeah.
That's so sweet.
Hi, my name is Ellen.
Hi, Ellen.
Hi, Ellen.
Let's see. Well, the situation in which I was a light to somebody else, I also do a type of therapy called cellular memory release, and I worked with a client for at least a year and a half who had also severe abuse issues with her father and other family members. And I knew she was an incredible artist, but she was absolutely blocked to creating. And I also happen to be an art teacher, so I do both. And finally, after about a year and a half of working with her, she had breakthrough after breakthrough and began to start painting again. And she sent me a little note. It's just like a little note that said, "Thank you for bringing the magic back into my life." And I always have that on my desk, because every time I look at that, I go, "Yay, Rhonda, yeah, you did it." And it makes me feel like I just knew who she was. I could just feel who she was, and I never gave up, or never let her give up on connecting with herself, her true self again. So that's such a beautiful thing to witness. And then for me, there was a time in which I also was leaving a marriage and was in deep, deep suffering. And I had a whole series of very magical events occur. I was in like really deep aching heart. And I was in the library looking for a book for one of my art classes for children. And something said, "Go to the self-help section." And I went over there, and this book literally fell off the shelf into my hands. And it was the biography of Ritananda Mai, who is known as the Hugging Saint. And I said, "Wow, is this the Hugging Saint I've been hearing about from my friend?" And literally 2 weeks later, at a Church of Mind Science, I was signing on a list to go see her in person. And within 3 weeks, I was in her presence. And the first darshan, or hug, that I received from her, she rubbed the back of my heart chakra. And this pain and suffering and just deep, deep anguish I was in, it was gone. It was just gone like that. And she has been a light in my life, a huge light in my life ever since.
Wow.
Wonderful.
My name is Meg. I'll start with the person that I was the light for was a friend of mine from college that was getting a divorce, who had 5 children, as I have 5 children. And she moved to a town in Southern California where she knew nobody, and she had very slight chances of getting a job. She was a teacher, but she ended up, because of something I said, and I don't even remember at this point what it was, but I think I said to her, "Would you want somebody like you teaching your children?" And she said that's all it took, and she found a job, and she has since, through the years, taught in grade school, and then she ended up teaching at UC Santa Barbara, teaching teachers how to teach writing, and had a very successful career. So, and she reminded me of what I had told her not too long ago when I saw her. And she also has been a light for me at times when I've struggled with different things. And it's usually just a one-line thing that she'll say, and it's like, "Oh, okay," and then things kind of fall into place from that. So, and I'm hoping to see her in a couple weeks. So.
Thank you.
For me, it was that what believed in me was actually my dog. I had a night where I just fell into a pit of absolute despair, and I truly thought I was going to take my life that night. And I actually started acting upon it, and I caught myself, and I went, "I'm going to need to call 911 because I'm really going way down this road." And I went and sat on the couch, and I was going to tell my partner that I'm calling 911 because I'm afraid I'm going to do something really dangerous. And that's when my dog came up and looked right in my eyes. She wasn't speaking, but she was talking to me, and she said, "You promised." And I went, "I know, but I can't." She just kept looking at me going, "You promised. You promised." And I went, "Okay, you're right. I promised. I promised to take care of you." She goes, "No, promise you'll never do this again." And I'm just looking at her going, "Okay, okay." And she sat there, just stared in my eyes, and she stayed with me the whole night, which she normally doesn't do. And I have never allowed myself to even for a moment think that life wasn't worth living after that. You know, so it was, yeah. And where I've done that for someone else, I was blessed to do elementary school plays years ago. And I was doing one, it was called Brill Cream, a takeoff of Grease. And this chubby little boy come up, And I go, what part did you want? He goes, I want to play Danny. And I was like, no, I don't think so. And I was looking at him, and I go, really? I go, well, show me what Danny would be like. So he's showing me, and I went, you know what? I think you are Danny. And he went out, and he got the part. He nailed it. It was just amazing. Years later, he invited me to his college graduation party, and he told me, he goes, getting that part of Danny made all the difference for me. And so he ended up doing really well in life, and so, yeah, so that's it for me.
Yeah.
As I've shared, I'm also active in several 12-step fellowships. And one time a sponsor said to me, you know, you should try to be the person your dog already thinks you are.
Well, let's see. I'll just say the first things that came to mind because after hearing so many things, oh, yeah, anyway. So the first thing that came to mind was when I came to Sacramento and I was not going to stay here. Heavens, this is 2 years and I'm out of here, It was my first job. I graduated from the Bay Area. And anyway, there was these two women, Pat and Gloria, and they were very spiritually oriented, which was not something that I had been exposed to much of. And I'll tell you, they really opened my eyes, both of them, and we became friends, and just they nurtured me. And I was in a pretty depressed state at that time, and they just, I feel like they saved me in a lot of ways because I ended up staying in Sacramento 50 years later. And then the other thing, what came to mind in terms of where I was a light is I was working my way through college as a nurse's aide, and you think, oh, that's an awful job. But I'll tell you, to have a lower role where you have time to, and I don't know it's true now for a lot of the CNAs, but to be able to be with a patient who's going through a dark night of the soul and to be there for them. I can remember the names of all my patients in this one skilled nursing facility that I worked with, and I was one of their favorites, and it was just such a treasure to get to know these people and their life story. So I think that's one story.
Thank you, Pam.
I was thinking back, and I started late and everything just about, but I became a teacher in my late. I graduated from oh my gosh, let me calm down. I graduated from college with a teaching degree in '98, and my dream and my hope was that I could come out here and live with my family, and start my career in California and this and that, and just move on with my life. And I tried it for like a year and a half, but it just did not work for me. And so I ended up substitute teaching, and then I ended up moving back to Kansas. And when I got to Kansas, I was really feeling, I got back to Kansas because I'd lived there most of my life. And so when I got back, I pretty much gave up. It's like, man, I went to college and I can't even get a job out here. Just got really hard on myself. And it was the winter time, and it was snowing, and it was like blizzard conditions. And there was someone knocking at my door, and they would not go away. And I thought, I'm just going to ignore them because it's too cold out there. Eventually they'll leave. They did not leave. I don't know how long they knocked in that cold blizzard wind. And I finally answered the door, and they said, hey, you need to call the school. They want to hire you to teach. The teacher's leaving. And the persistent knock, it was like God just, no, this is yours, this is yours, this is yours, this is yours. And so sure enough, I called, and then we set up a time, and then I was hired as a teacher,
Wow.
right? And so then I was able to work in Kansas for 12 and a half years, and then voila, I end up here. So it all worked out in the right timing. But I'll never forget that because the young woman that had been knocking, we ended up working together also until she moved on. So anyways, I just thought of that. That was beautiful. And as far as me being a light for others, I'll just go with my kids because, they're grown. And we've, been through the deep, dark times together, when they were growing up. We all had this, we're suffering the same despair and heartache together. And they put a lot of trust in me, and as a parent, trying to figure this thing out to get them to safety and myself. And so through the years, there's a lot of, a lot of pain and guilt, as a mom, and, wish you could have done things better. But I've had my kids come back to me, and they said, Mom, you never gave up on us. Mom, we love you. Don't you see the good things that you've done? Don't you see the outcome of all that we've been through? And so I just am very thankful for them, for reflecting my light back to me, because, there's a lot of dark times, you work through and you just forget, it's like, wow, I really did make a difference.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Loretta. Hi, I'm not used to that. Hi. Light. To see someone else that provided me light. That's really a hard one. I have my both sisters that were always there through my negative ways of growing up, doing drugs, alcohol. Yeah, you could say it. And with the grace of God, God's the one that provided me to stop drinking. But what made me really stop and look was when I saw my cousin. She going down the hill. I don't know if she's still drinking, but she's still alive, and we thought we were going to lose her. And just the way her appearance is, yeah, when that alcohol eats your liver, your appearance goes. And I hate to say it, but yeah, her appearance is very badly. And it can be a little scary if a little kid comes up to her like, oh, and it's sad. I'm sorry to say that, but it's sad to see her. And I'm not close to her anymore. We were growing up. I left all that side of the family and friends, and no one knows where I live now except my immediate blessing family. And so I don't know if you want to say she was a light, but I didn't want my son to ever see me that way, or my sisters to see me that I'm suffering of liver. And so I had to pray. I really had to pray on it. And I told God, I was like, no, I don't. I want to stop drinking. I want to stop. I stopped doing drugs when I left my husband many, many moons ago, but it was just, I was still drinking. And I prayed. I said, now I realized it was just a habit. So I prayed that he would stop the habit. And with the grace of God, yes, he's the light. So I've been clean since 2022 when I moved over here off of Bradshaw, 2021, 2020, something like that time. And and then of course I had to lose the weight from the beer. And I got myself eating better, doing much better. And both of my sisters then, they're twins, always looks well. But then I found out that my sister was pre-diabetic. And she likes to eat chocolate, and even though she exercises, walks, and then she saw me losing weight, so I was just encouraging her what she should eat, what she should write down. And so luckily it's been a while now, luckily she's not pre-diabetic anymore. So I don't know, she has thanked me before. It was some years ago that she told me, and I was like, okay. So at least I was able to help her follow that direction. But yeah, so thank you for letting me share my story, and
Thank
it's
you.
my first time being here. Thank you.
Like, good to hear.
Oh, let's see.
We're talking about when somebody was a light for us and when we were a light for somebody else. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Renee. And there was a small group, I guess it takes a village. There was a small group of counselors that had a bunch of us in situations where we could blossom and thrive. And I was painfully shy. I was not the wallpaper, the wallflower, I was the wallpaper. And so I had to train myself to learn how to be in a group of 3 or 4 or 5 people. And if I had something to say and someone interrupted me, I would completely go blank. I would freeze and I wouldn't be able to get back into the conversation. So I went from there and I had those people supporting me as I made changes. And I made changes in my looks, my carriage. I got contacts, dry eye now. I got contacts and I changed my name. And I did it without a lawyer. Ask me later. And it took right away. It just took right away. And I was observed by a psychic once, and she said, my question to her was, am I a walk-in? Because a previous psychic had made the comment that I was a walk-in. And she said, long pregnant pause, you get nervous and you go, what is she gonna say? And she said, you're not a walk-in, but you made such a dramatic change that it could have been read that way. So I sort of went, and it was the scripting in my family that was locking me in. And so I had to break those chains, and I'm a self-taught speaker, which I love to do now. I became a public speaker for the police department in crime prevention, and I became a teacher, emergency credentialed teacher, a resource teacher, things like that. And so I went from being the wallpaper to coming out, and I could lead a group and teach them how to present a topic. So it was a huge transformation, and I sometimes forget about it because actually telling you this was my second choice tonight when I realized what the pattern was. When I was a light for someone else, I had the good fortune of being with a really lousy resource teacher. And the reason it was a delight is because she gave me the problematic kids, and I loved it. And I got the little ESL girl, and all I knew was the colors, right, and some numbers. But I got her to light up and be happy to be in the room because she was being sent out, resource stuff. You get sent out of your main room for extra tutoring. And my teacher totally ignored her, did not give her the resources she was being paid to do. And I just thought, from my heart, I can help her. And we talked a lot about tacos. And we talked a lot about colors and numbers. And she was little. She was like second grade. In that classroom, there were 2 other things. There was a group of 6 kids from a woman's class named Selinsky. And I called them the Selinsky 6. And I lined them up one day, and I pretended I was really mad at them. So I took them, they come in the room, and the bells ring, the doors close. I said, okay, come here, outside, line up. And I talked like that. Outside, line up. And they all lined up. And then we'd had some time together. And then I said, okay, now I'm going to give you an assignment. And I'm going to give you, each one of you, an assignment. And at the end of this period of time, you're going to get some really cool school supplies as your reward for doing this. And at the very end, you're going to have to stand up and speak in front of the rest of us. And of course, what that did to their little hearts, boom, boom, boom. So I walked them through some things, and what I had done is I had observed that these kids, for instance, an easy one. One kid would stand up in his classroom, and his teacher was really frustrated with him. He didn't do anything, he didn't say anything, he didn't make noise, he didn't interrupt anything. But if she was helping a kid over here, and he's over here, he'd just stand up and look around. And it took him forever to sit back down. So I gave them each a control exercise to do, something to improve. Didn't have to be perfect, just improve so that we could notice. And the other thing was for him, he had to sit down more. and so I had these 6 little boys. So one day I was out on the playground with them, and she was out there, and I walked up next to her. I said, how are the kids acting? She goes, they're acting better. And I said, oh, good. Then something I did was working. And she goes, oh, I thought it was me.
But you were the light. You were the light.
Yes.
Yes.
One little boy,
Okay, thank you.
one little boy was really traumatized. I wasn't told specifically, but I heard it through the grapevine that he was left accidentally alone with a dead relative who was caring for him, and nobody came and checked on him soon enough, and so that's what traumatized him. And so he was a selective mute, and I know nothing about selective mute, and here I am with this little boy. So I was studying art therapy. I had studied art therapy with Dr. Yulin at CSUS. And so I gave him black construction paper on purpose. And I asked him to draw me a picture of anything wanted. And I was amazed. He drew a picture of a warm, dark summer night camping with his grandpa. So the black was like his foil for this, oh, I'm camping and I'm a big guy now. I'm in the dark, deep night, and we've got a tent, and my grandpa and I. Grandpa was good to him. Grandma, not so much. But anyway, and then I wrote on the back of the paper. Well, the psychiatrist got a psychologist, whatever, the roving one. She comes by and she says, how did you get all this from him? I haven't been able to get anything from him. And I said, oh, I don't know. I was a little bit snarky. So that wasn't the happiest end of the story. But I knew how to work with him, and I didn't know how. I knew. One day he wouldn't come to my class. He was laying his head on his desk in his room, and he wouldn't participate at all. And he'd been that way for several hours till I got to him. And I went and found him like that, and I just went up behind him, and I laid my chest against his back, and I scooped my arm under him, and I said nothing. And after a few minutes, could have been 5, I don't know, he got up, he went to one of the main teachers, and he said, I want to go to Miss Renee's room. So it was obviously a heartwarming job that I had there, and it didn't pay enough to pay the bills. But it was wonderful. I remember his name was Dante.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Hi, my name is Liz,
Hi, Liz.
and I had many lights, but what came up was the most recent, pretty much. Well, not that recent, 8 years ago. I used to smoke, and it got to the point when I smoked, my extremities were tingling. I just hated smoking, but I couldn't stop. It was horrible. It was getting worse. And I wanted so much to, so I found Nicotine Anonymous group and a 12-step group. And there was an old man who says, I know you can do it. I believe in you. And so he gave me so much support that everybody in the group, but especially him, I would hear those words, I believe in you. I know you can do it. So I was able to do it. I thought it was like a miracle because I thought I could never do it. So that's one light is of support. And as far as me being a light, I used to work in human services, like social work, and my job was to look for home care providers, train them, interview them, put them on my registry of home care providers, and refer them to the elderly that needed providers that received the program in home support services. So this system was so bad, especially for the providers, because they never paid them on time. And these providers worked so hard, didn't get paid on time, didn't get paid well, were mistreated by the by the clients, abused in the sense of they put them to work like slaves. So I was their champion. I was always looking out for them, making sure they got paid. I went out of my way to help them, as well as the clients. But, and they were like, thank you, Miss Liz. And they were so happy when they got help because a lot of people didn't care. They're like, oh, you know. But it bothered me when I heard them saying, I got to pay my rent and I haven't received my check. I mean, there was one thing. Or this client is treating me really bad, and so on and so forth. So I was their light as much as possible. And I did that for about, and before that I worked with persons with disabilities, so I helped them a lot too. So, yeah, I guess I was a light to them as much as I could be.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
My name's Bill.
Hi,
I
Bill.
think my most recent experience with light, of someone being light, would be my brother, surprisingly. Our dad passed over about 6 months ago, and my dad and I didn't see eye to eye very well, but he was still my father, and I loved him. My brother is not real touchy-feely. He's not heart-centered. He's like my dad. He was strong, silent type. Well, I'm the opposite. I wear my feelings on my sleeve. And so when Dad passed, it hit me much harder because he was 96 years old. But it hit me really hard. And surprisingly, my brother really stepped up. I mean, to the point where I thought, who is this man? I mean, he was that attentive and concerned about my well-being. He's back in his, I'm a manly man, but for that period of time, it was really, really powerful and refreshing. So, thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. I try. You know, it's really hard for me to talk about when I was the light because it's almost braggadocious. I mean, if I say, well, but one of the things a story I love to tell is I owned and operated a little grocery store for 15 years, and I had a little holder on the counter, and I had the Daily Word out there. I didn't push anything, but I just put it out every day, and I would turn it. Well, one day I took it into my office to make a photocopy of it or something. I was looking at something, and I had a lot of blue-collar customers, and most every morning the miners would come in, not young people, but actual silver miners in Nevada. And I was in my office, and I heard this grumbly voice say, "Where the hell's the Daily Word?" And I thought, who is that? And so I dashed out there thinking my poor clerk is out there with this guy that's angry. And I said, here it is. He said, I look forward to reading that every day.
Oh.
And I thought, golly, I mean, and you know, as New Thought students, we aren't real pushy with our spiritual path. We don't go door to door knocking on doors, converting people. But if we can live the light, they see that light.
Yes.
So,
Right.
yeah, one of my favorite stories.
Thank you so much.
Right.
Oh, hi, I'm Anna. And,
Hi.
oh, wow, where do I begin? So, in terms of somebody being the light, one of the stories that come up is my daughter was diagnosed at 17. She's in high school with Crohn's, which was very difficult for me, very close to her. And so it was, it was harrowing. So I was very fortunate to have Dr. Davies, bless her. She's a gastroenterologist at UCD. And it got to the point where Dr. Davies and I became one, because of course, I took her my daughter to every single appointment, all the, the X-rays and all that. And sometimes I go into Dr. Davies' office, and she's, sculpting her and all that. And it's so interesting because it got to the point where, because it was so constant, bringing her to appointments. When she was first diagnosed, it was a lot of visitation. So I remember being in her office, and she's scoping her, and she's, looking at the X-ray, and I'm just sitting there with like tears in my eyes, trying not to. And she looked at me. She gave me that look, and she just whispered. It was such a compassion in her eyes, and the fact that I was always there with my daughter, she was like, "Wow." She said, "You're the mama bear, and we're gonna take care of her, so you never have to worry." So she was the light for me at that moment with my daughter, who, by the way, she's well now. She's, graduated high school, college, and she's married now, and all that. But it was a harrowing time, and she was a big light for me. And so that's what comes to my mind. Now, in terms of being a light for somebody else, I was working at this, my last job before I moved here to California. It's an agency called Families First, so I was a committee organizer, and I was working in this community, which was low income, mostly single mothers. So I was doing empowering for them and meeting with them and just kind of uplifting them. But there's always some folks that stand out. So 3 or 4 of them that were coming into my office, and they're just busting all over the place and using expletives, so, and all that, which, that's okay. And there was one in particular. Her name was Lori, and she happened to be Jewish, Lori. And she was, had a hard life. She had a daughter, and so she was struggling, but she was always angry, And so she'd come into the office, and she'd just unload. And so I got to the point where I would just stare at her when she comes in, and I said, "Okay, Lori, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to unload." And she's like, and then this was like it became habitual. And I says, and then when I let her unload, I said, "So are you ready? Now, have you said everything? So now let's get to work." Right? So that was a pattern I formed with Lori. And so she became one of my favorite folks because she was so high energy, and she was very smart, and I know she wanted to move ahead. So I constantly was working with her, mostly because she had a little girl as well. And so it got to the point where, as time went on, she got very close to me. And so because I really was enrolling her, not only in higher education and, how to communicate with her little girl, because she was like, and just kind of being there, because I was a mother as well. And so, she got very used to me. She was a big one. She was, in terms of her temperament. So as it turns out, when I had to move and I left and all that, and I was there for about 2 years, and she said to me, this is a person who was always mad and angry. She says, "I'll say this to you, Anna." She says, "I'll always appreciate how you never judged me, how you had so much patience with me, how you let me, go all crazy, and I really will miss you." And so she used to send, when I had moved here, she was still sending me, she was on Facebook and sending me all these little things. And so that's one of them that I think about. So, yeah, so that would be Lori. So, yeah.
Thank
I
you.
think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful that how you gave her, you provided her with that time and that space, so that she could feel listened to and supported. So you really did a wonderful thing for her.
Thank you.
RJ, when somebody was a light to you and you were a light to somebody else.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
So the lights to me are a number of people, but I'm really feeling the presence of Spiritual Life Center lately. And so as I look about the room, even in the last month, Reverend Rick has been a light to me in conversations. Bill has been a light to me for the last year and a half. Renee and I have had some deep conversations. Teresa has taken me out to lunch 2 or 3 times, and she's been a light to me with some wonderful conversations. Pam invited me over to her house, and we sat in her backyard once, and we had a wonderful conversation. Reverend Deborah bought me soup when I had COVID, and she drove over to my apartment. Cheryl has helped with events for the last 10 years, anytime I was, leading galas, et cetera, Mystic Cafes. Eldon and I had some deep conversations. Dawn and I walked on the levee and had sacred conversation. Sandy's been for me during, situations. Lisa's always giving me hugs and smiling. So, yeah, these people have been a deep source of gratitude, and they've all been lights in my life in a very deep and profound way. And then I think I'm becoming a light at Spiritual Life Center because as I've recovered from my husband's death and taking A Course in Miracles for a year, after daily study of A Course in Miracles, I finally learned how to activate my own light. So now after 64 and a half years, I can finally be a light in the world, and I'm complete.
Thank you. Dr. Lieberman writes, I'm on page 38, experimental evidence shows light imparts energy to water, including body water. The energy may, in some instances, provide enough energy for sustaining life. Pollock and his team of scientists have confirmed that there exists a 4th phase of water beyond solid, liquid, and gas. The body's cells are composed of living water, which differs from normal water as it is imbued with light. Hearing all the stories comes back. I was raised in a Jewish household. In Judaism, in typical synagogue, there's something called the tzedakah box, giving, compassion. It's in a room. You go in. If you need money, you go in and you take money. If you have money, you go in and put money in the tzedakah box. And I think it's the same thing with light, about taking it and giving it. And in terms of living water, when I read this, of course, remembered in John, the Gospel of John, where Jesus meets with the Samaritan woman and says, can you give me some water? And she says, well, it's strange you're talking to a Samaritan woman. If you knew who you were talking to, Finally, he starts talking about living water. If you have this living water, you'll never be thirsty again. And so where do you go for this living water? I was thinking 2 places I've been going. My morning prayer and meditation really brings me so much that living water, and I try to get up before the rest of the household is up, and really that brings me that living water. The other is I love classical music, and a lot of times listening to classical music will bring me that living water. Peg, how about you? Living water.
Oh, well, gosh, I shared already, so I'm not sure as far as living water. Gosh.
I would say your pottery, for example.
Well, oh, that's a good example. Yes, to have the water and the clay,
Mm-hmm.
and to merge those together and perhaps make something, perhaps not, but just feeling the oneness in that process has meant a lot to me. Living water. Yeah, when you say that, I think of waterfalls, and some magnificent waterfalls that we have in Virginia that it transports you. There's something about the energy of water, and especially one that just thunders, and transports you, and it's like you're not in your body anymore. You just become one with that wonderful sound and that wonderful energy.
Thank you. RJ, as they say, the last will be first, the first will be, your last will be first. Where do you get living water?
I like the whole notion of the intention is when there's the intention on the water comes alive.
Yep.
And so there's, the intention on a pet, then something happens. And as it's activated within me, perhaps what I'm going to do from now on is I'm going to, before I drink a cup of water, I'll look at the cup of water and I'll intend to activate my inner light towards the water, and perhaps the molecules will dance and align up. Did you want me to?
Beautiful. Yeah. Anybody else who want to share where you get your living water?
Any time that I spend in nature, outdoors,
Wow.
especially if I'm on the water kayaking.
Yes.
Or any time that I can get to pet a cat.
That's beautiful. Okay.
The ocean, I like
Oh.
going there. And I also get it meditating.
Yeah, often when I start my meditation, I imagine a waterfall of light pouring through me and a waterfall clearing and cleansing everything before I start the meditation. And also, I love to collect water from different special places like Mount Shasta and St. Francis of Assisi, and all different waters, and put them together in little remedies I make.
I think I get it from SLC.
Oh.
Bringing here, really, it's made such a difference in my life.
Thank you.
When I don't come, I notice the difference. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Two things come to mind. One is the music at SLC.
Yes.
It blows my mind almost every Sunday. And then being in a storm. I just love being in a storm,
Yes.
listening to the wind and the rain.
Yes.
I learned two things about getting things from nature, and I couldn't figure out as a young woman why I would get a little itch under my skin, like I couldn't stand being in my own skin until I got up around big trees. And then more recently, so that's decades ago, and so more recently I read about Japanese forest bathing. And the Japanese government really promotes it from their health department, or whatever they call it. And so what happens is the scientists have now figured out that there's a hormone, I forget the name, but there's a hormone that they exude. And so literally being around them boosts our immune system. And I found that I was sensitive to that energy. And the other thing is if I'm not around water for too long, then I start getting a very similar feeling. I get agitated, I'm irritable for no reason, and it's a special kind of irritation that I get without trees or water. It doesn't have to be big or the ocean, but it's negative ions are the good ones, and so when you're around water, it's the negative ions, and I'm sure that's true with the rainwater and things. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Well, I get it from Bill's jacuzzi. Very relaxing. No, but really, I get it from painting, using my water to clean my brushes, mix my paint, just having fun with colors.
Well, I'm certainly with Cheryl. SLC is so important. And the Sundays that I think, maybe football today instead, I'm not going to. But I force myself, well, it's not even forced. I convince myself I need to go. And then when I'm so glad that I went, I mean, gosh, I would have missed all that. So, and certainly my time with Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Part of my water. So.
Yeah, I would say living water Agapi or sweat lodge, like we're pouring that water on the grandfather.
Yes.
He breathed that billions of years old. So for me, that is the embodiment or the physical manifestation of that water is life, that all those thousands of millions of years of knowledge. So that when we're in there like that, and of course anything theological. So I like coming to SLC is very similar. The 5 points are very similar to how we believe.
Yes.
So it's really good. I like that. And she has some water in my life.
Aww.
That was very sweet. So, yeah, and he's introduced me to a lot of the sweat lodge, and I really appreciate getting ingrained in that now. For me, it's always been, again, walking through the park. I live in Carmichael. Nansel Hoffman Park is close by and have a river, and I go there all the time. I do my walks and my meditation. There's a little bench that's there, and I sit there, and I'm still, I just still, and that's where I get my living water, actually, so. Yeah.
Thank you. I've gotten so much from from the shares of all of you. Next week, we're going to be, and starting this Sunday, we're going to be looking at lighting up your dreams, the chapters in the book. If I could ask, if you, either current dreams or maybe a dream from your past, if you could write down some dreams, and come, I don't mean to give out homework or whatever, but but it'd be interesting to come back and talk, again, some perspective that Dr. Lieberman gives to dreams, and then to share some of our dreams next week. So looking forward to that. Thank you so much for coming, and looking forward to seeing you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It was so nice.
Thank
to meet
you.